Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's movie blog. I am the critic who is a sin and hope you're doing well, and I just gotta be honest with you guys. I am always very straightforward when it comes to the things that I talk about, and I'm always honest with you guys, and also I can admit where I'm wrong, unlike some of the other people that we know working in Hollywood and other places who cannot do this. I can. Aquaman's actually an early success, so it's still very early to tell, and I just did a full box office breakdown over on the Geeks and Gamers channel, so that video should be live a little bit later today, so please go check that out if you want more details about the box office, not just for Aquaman but also for all the other movies that have been out this week. I go into much more detail over there, so please go support that channel, and also please go support that video. But I did want to make one for this channel specifically because I just wanted to say I was wrong. I thought Aquaman was going to be a failure. I thought Aquaman was going to be yet another one of the DC films not to break $1 billion, and might not even get close to $500 million, $600 million. And because basically when I saw the trailers for these movies, I thought, this movie especially, I thought to myself, the CGI looks like garbage, and I still feel that way. I still have my doubts about this movie for myself at the very least, because I do not think the CGI looks very good. I am questioning whether or not Aquaman is the best person to try and put the future of your franchise on, but it looks like Jason Momoa is somehow pulling it off, because in China, as you see up here, it's made $94 million in the best ever, not just Warner Brothers, not just DC, but also even a December box office for China, which is very good news for them. And the reason why this is good news is because right now, it's only open in China. It is not open in any other market. It opens everywhere else December 21st, and I was very much doubting whether or not I was going to see this opening night, and now I can't not see this opening night because it just, to me, it's so intriguing. This is such an intriguing thing because normally when I make certain predictions about the box office, I tend to be right. I don't tend to make predictions just out of nowhere. I always try and base my predictions on fact and figures and just everything that I knew, because at this point all we knew was what the trailers revealed and also to what the history of DC films has been. And so far the history of DC films has not been very good. Now some people are trying to say, oh, they made money. Yes, to a point, because you still had it where even Wonder Woman, which universally was well liked by critics, audiences alike, even that film couldn't break $1 billion. Even that film only made around $850 million by the end of its run, which is still very good. It means that it made money. But keep in mind that these films, especially these big budget DC films, keep in mind that they cost a minimum, production budget alone, $150 million. Many of them cost even more than that, maybe $200 to $250 million, because especially since they are relying so much more on visual effects these days, which is interesting that visual effects actually cost more than what a practical effect used to cost. It's just odd how that has kind of transferred over. But the fact that they've relied so much on those effects and it's ballooned their budget, I thought to myself that it just makes sense then that the production budget is ballooned. They obviously put a crap ton of money into their marketing budget, which means you're looking at anywhere between $350 and $500 million that it costs just to put the film out there. And that's with marketing and also production costs. And so therefore you need to make probably $700+ million just to break even, because keep in mind this, that even if they were to make $500 million, let's say $600 million, they only get 60% of that total from the box office, which means that it still has, that means at that point it's only made around $350 million max, and if the film costs $500 million to make, guess what? That's actually the point where it's not even breaking even, because sometimes you say, oh, if it costs $500 million and they make $600 million, then they've made a profit of $100 million. But that's just not how the math breaks down, because you need to take that 60% out of the box office first, and then also need to keep in mind the production budget is not with marketing. And when all of these numbers come together, it makes sense then that DC has struggled tremendously to the point where it's broken even on many of its films and made small profits on the others. Now, they've made enough of a profit on certain films, including Wonder Woman being one example of that, to be able to justify continuing to make DC movies, but it's still a very hard game for them to play. This was, in a lot of ways, this was going to be the last really good shot that they were going to have in being able to break into the superhero movie market, because Marvel has done such a great job of making movies for less money. So obviously you look to Ant-Man, and they spent a lot less on Ant-Man than they do on any other film, and we're still able to turn a profit on those, still able to make, you know, at least $100 million on all of those projects that even the ones they spent less money on. So they actually got a pretty good return on their investment in those. But DC so far has tried to put so much into every single one of their films and have just not had that creative ability. And I honestly think that the main reason why that DC has been held back for so long is because of Zack Snyder. Now, my heart goes out to him for all the personal stuff that he's had to go through in his life, especially, after or within the events of Justice League. But at the end of the day, it doesn't take away the fact that it was because of his vision that DC did not really take off with audiences. And there are still DC fanboys out there that will try and say, oh, no, you're wrong. It's doing well. The universe is fine. And they'll use this as an example. But people cannot forget their history. If you forget your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And the history of DC has not been very good. Other than the Christopher Nolan Batman films, there has not really been a good DC film that's made a crap ton of money. The closest to it would be Wonder Woman, because Wonder Woman didn't cost nearly as much as Justice League, or even others like Batman v Superman, which cost a crap ton of money because you had so many visual effects on top of everything else that was going on. You had all of that stuff to deal with, and so therefore it ballooned the budget, and the marketing obviously was crazy for it, and they still were only able to break even with a lot of those films. And Wonder Woman, they were able to make a modest profit, but still nothing close to the profit that was made from Avengers Infinity War, which made over $2 billion at the box office, and Avengers Endgame is set to make as much, if not even more. And that's after 20 films over 10 years have come out. People are already burned out on DC films, more so than Marvel at this point, and the box office numbers prove that much. The very fact that Justice League, which is supposed to be the biggest movie, it was supposed to be their Avengers, is the lowest grossing DC film ever, like in the current state, is very bad. It's very bad. So Aquaman truly was their last chance to get things right, and it looks like they did it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Zack Snyder is not involved anymore. James Wan was able to use his own vision. He knows how to make big budget films. He knows how to appeal to broader audiences. And it looks like he brought those skills into this movie because, as we see up here, $94 million opening weekend in China. The best that Warner Brothers, DC, and also even in December that they've ever had, which is a huge deal. Now, some people might ask, like, what does China have to do with the rest of the market? Well, keep this in mind, that when a big budget film makes a crap ton of money, you remember how I always talk about that split. Usually, if it's a big budget film, success is measured on how much money it makes overseas, and also if it's being able to be comparable to what it makes domestically. So normally you see around a 60, 40, 70, 30 split, with 70% or 60% coming from foreign markets, and that 30 or 40 coming from domestic. And some people might say, like, why is that a good thing? Well, because normally that that foreign market is usually around $1 billion on its own. And then you don't have nearly as much coming from the domestic market because there's obviously less people here than in all other places within the world. And when you take those into account, what you understand and what you start to realize is that the foreign market is huge. And then when you break the foreign market down even more so, you end up finding out that China, if it opens in China, usually accounts for around a third of the entire foreign market total. And so the fact that it's already around $100 million, and this film could be on pace to make $250 max in China alone. If you take that as just a third of what it makes in all the rest of the countries, and that's even lowballing it, because it could potentially do even better in other countries, you're looking at a film that could finally be the first DC film that not only breaks $1 billion, but also turns a very, very large profit. And this is going to be the movie that really sets the scene, because they'll be able to look at this film and say, what worked? What didn't work? What changes did we make to the formula to make it more palatable to audiences? Because that's really been the big problem with DC so far, is that it hasn't really been palatable. Yeah, DC fanboys have been happy about it, but it hasn't really been able to appeal beyond just that. I mean, just look to the box office totals and the ratings from audiences too, if you want to see evidence of that as an example. So they'll have to look at this film and say, okay, what do we do here? And how can we adapt that to, what, Suicide Squad 2? And I think that, honestly, because you have not really heard a whole lot about the future of DC films. Yeah, they've talked about it kind of in, a basic skeleton of, okay, these are the, the films that we have planned, but you haven't really heard too much detail about it. With Marvel, you know for a fact that there are certain movies coming out because, again, every single film has been successful so far. But DC has had a very, very rocky road to get to this point. So Aquaman could be that first film that finally, one, gets them on the right track, but also could be the film that teaches them these are the things, these are the good practices that we need to be able to adopt with all of our films, and now we can start to move forward and say, okay, now what movies do we want to make? What characters do we want to give attention to? And things like that. People might say, oh, what about Birds of Prey and all these other things? Well, when it comes to those movies, you still haven't really heard a whole lot about them. And I think the reason why is because they were putting a lot of their attention on this film because they knew they had to get this film right. And now that they seem to have gotten it right, if China is any indication, and again, it's still very early, so I could easily come back to you in a few weeks when it comes out December 21st and say, hey, this was a fluke, or hey, it didn't do nearly as well, or it dropped off. Who knows? But based on this number, because normally you don't see that kind of up and down shift when it comes to Chinese box office. Usually if it's doing well opening weekend, it's going to continue to do well. Again, just based on my experience of what I've seen. This film very well finally could be the DC film that everyone, not just DC fans, but everyone's been waiting for. And you kind of see that also with the fact, again, 94, 93.6 technically. Again, those are just early estimates too, because obviously we're still waiting on the official numbers overall, but still, that's a very good opening weekend. You have 97% of people who wanna and cannot wait to see this movie. And again, this is someone from, I look at that image and I say, oh my gosh, I can't. It's just a CGI, it's digital noise to me. But now I finally feel like I might just be excited enough to go see this opening night in Dolby, where I know it's going to be released. Again, 2 hours, 23-minute movie, already has an 8.3 out of 10 from IMDb. Now, who knows if these are just people just, randomly putting ratings out there. If these are people who are actually seeing it. All I do know as a fact, though, is that early reviews have been very positive. Early reviews have been good, saying that it's a damn good time, it's a roller coaster ride, and it's almost like an 80s action movie. And if it fits all of those things that critics are saying about it, then I might very well love this movie. And so, once again, I have to say that I was wrong, or at least at this point, it seems like I was wrong, that this film was not going to do well, because it's doing extremely well in China. But anyway, guys, what are y'all's thoughts about Aquaman? Are you excited for it? Do you think that it's going to break do you think it's going to be the first DC film to break $1 billion? Obviously we have Wonder Woman 2 that was greenlit because it did so well, but even that one, we still haven't had as much word about it, I feel like, as you've had for other Marvel films. And again, it makes sense. It's similar to what's going on with Star Wars right now. Star Wars knows they need to get Episode 9 right in order to do any future films. Yeah, we've heard about television, but keep in mind, those television shows that are being either already have been released or will be released are things that happened before Episode 9. So it's all to try to get people excited for it. This was kind of the end-all, be-all for DC to be able to finally get something right, and it looks like they've done it. I would love to hear your thoughts about this in the comments below. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe. It helps me out a lot. You are all amazing and beautiful people. Have a great day, and as always, God bless.